Alright, hello everyone. I am back to do my August wrap-up. Unfortunately, the setup is not fantastic. There are very yellow lights everywhere. It's early in the morning and this is the best that I can do. And if we don't film this now, it's not happening. So we're just going to jump right in. I read less books than normal in August, which is fine. I feel like the month was a blur. And I also, unfortunately, have not had the time to transfer my notes from my cell phone into my book notes notebook. So I don't know how cohesive and, well-formed these reviews will be, but it's just an off month, guys. There's nothing we can do about it. But let's just get started. I first read Nobody, Somebody, Anybody by Kelly McClory. So this is, well, first I read it because Steffi said that this is one of her favorite books of the year, if not her favorite book of the year. Tell me, Steffi, tell me which one. So this is about a young woman who is working as a chambermaid at a very upscale yacht club type of hotel or residence, and her dream is to become an EMT and to help people, save people, and unfortunately that hasn't worked out for her thus far for a bunch of reasons that we will uncover, but it becomes clear very early on that she's not doing well. This is a young woman who projects her dream life onto the world around her. She's so in her head in almost an exhaustive way. And we learn little bits and pieces about her past, why she's not doing well, why she's in the situation that she's in. But I think the most interesting part of this character, Amy, she is somebody who, almost to trick herself into getting where she wants to go, she constructs this entire persona and life around her and gets herself into some trouble for doing so. So, this is like my bread and butter, a young woman not doing super well. We're in the inner workings of her mind in a way that feels really intimate and exhausting, and we just want to kind of give her a hug, but she's not super likable. And this has been compared to Moshfegh, that this book is similar to the Moshfegh type of character study, which I think is fair in a lot of respects, but I also think that at least my reading of this book, Moshfegh really leans into the moral ambiguity of her characters. She's not telling you to like them or dislike them, she's just saying, like, here they are, they exist, and she lets you kind of feel all different ways about them. But I feel like at the end of this book, I ended up feeling more pity for Amy. I didn't really think she was this awful person. I think she's a specific type of young woman. And I think you end up really caring for her and almost wanting what's best for her, but also being like, you're not making the best choices, which we can all appreciate. As young people, maybe people don't make the best choices and we get ourselves into lots of trouble, but I felt for Amy so much. And she's somebody who works so hard, but that she's just like, she's not all there all the time. So I would recommend it. It's not Moshfegh, guys. It's not Moshfegh, but it's like a book that I assumed I would love, and I did really enjoy it. It's a fun read. So that is Nobody, Somebody, Anybody. Then we got to, so this is actually my first arc that I was ever sent by a publisher. This is from Head of Zeus Publishing House. So this is The Silence of Scheherazade, and I believe it actually shows you the Scheherazade. It shows you the pronunciation at the front of the book, which is really awesome. So this is a tricky book in my mind to talk about. This came out at the beginning of September. I believe it might already be out, but thank you so much for sending it to me. This is a historical fiction novel, which we know I love. Oh, sorry, Riley's. Okay, so we know that I love a historical fiction novel. This is set in the city of Smyrna, in the Ottoman Empire, in between and during the World Wars. So this is kind of a generational tale. We're with our characters for a significant period of time. And I've read a lot of historical fiction about World War I and World War II, but I feel like even in my high school curriculum, we didn't really focus on the Ottoman Empire, maybe for like the first week of world history. But other than that, I just didn't know a lot. So I actually really enjoyed reading this for that perspective. And so, like I said, this book has some like almost mystery elements that's kind of building, but really it's about these different groups of people and how they're changing over time, and how this larger than life war is affecting like their interpersonal relationships. We follow, you know, a couple of young girls in their childhood friendship. We follow lovers who have been lovers for decades. We follow parents and their children. And I think at the very best of this book, it sometimes feels a little bit like My Brilliant Friend, in the sense of it's this city on the precipice of change, and all these people are trying to make normal life decisions knowing that kind of the world is changing around them outside of their control. So I think that's what I enjoyed most, even like the little conversations between childhood friends talking about trying to make these huge decisions, but they're also just children. I do think that the beginning of this book was super messy and I just could not get my bearings, and sometimes my interest kind of came and went with it, but the ending of this book I think was so spectacular. It really shows what happens to the city in a really violent and terrifying way, but this book had real moments of beauty. The writing was sometimes really beautiful, but I think almost the mystery elements, I didn't need all of that. I could have just read about, you know, different people being people in times of great stress. But I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. And you guys know I love some historical fiction. I don't know the date it came out, but definitely September. So thank you so much for sending it to me. I did enjoy it, but I think sometimes it was a little bit messy. But it's over a considerable period of time, so it is hard to do that. So that's my take. And then we have one. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to stop. This is Dead Astronauts by VanderMeer. So it's not necessarily a sequel, but it's in the same world as Born, which you know is my favorite book of the year thus far, and I don't know if anything can beat it. How much I've been thinking about this book, it's like haunting me, you know, weeks after the fact. But this is in the same world. I don't know, if you haven't seen my review of that, you might not know what I'm talking about, but this is a post-apocalyptic war. There is the same city and the company that has destroyed the world with their bioengineering and their ecological disasters and their Amazon nests. So this is a tough one, and you might remember if you saw my review about Born, that is an objectively weird book. We have bioengineered flying bears, we have sea creatures with the power to transform, but this takes it to another level. This is by far the weirdest book I've ever read, and in a way that it like challenges you. So Dead Astronauts, the title comes from these three mysterious figures that do make an appearance in Born, but are really just there to intensify the mystery and the weirdness of it all. But in this book we learn who those figures might have been. This book kind of plays with time and place and personhood in ways that will make your brain kind of bend and really work for it. But I will say that at the end of this, like the second half of this book, the weirdness never goes away, but it does give you more to like grasp onto to center yourself. And I know it's not Born. It's not Born. It is a challenging book, and this is more of like the experience of reading it rather than getting sucked into the story. You're sucked into the experience. But I think he's wonderful. I think he's so smart. And the whole latter half of the book is really talking about animal rights in a very interesting way, and something that I haven't seen done before. So I loved it. I have not stopped thinking about it since reading it as well. It is a book that will haunt you, and I think what VanderMeer does that is so genius is he makes this world feel alien and horrifying to us, but then sometimes like gives you those little breadcrumbs to remind yourself it's not that different from our world. And he's like, wait, here's your touchstones of reality. Is it really that different? Now here's some bioengineered wildness, and kind of try to get through that. But he's always bringing you back to something that resonates with you in a way that is an absolute joy and a wild ride to read. It's like a fever dream book, and it's not as easy to read as Born, but so rewarding, and I would absolutely recommend it. And also this cover is quite a beautiful cover. So I just love him, and when I run out of books, I need him to like publish much more quickly, because I just can't get enough. Then we have a book that I loved in equal measure, and that is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. So this is a very challenging book to read. This is based on a true story a real reform school that operated for 111 years and warped the lives of thousands of children. So this is about a young boy named Elwood, and he is unfairly convicted of a crime and sent to a reform school, taken away from his grandmother, and he's sent there with a bunch of other young boys who were there for various reasons. And it almost appears to the world that this is a place to reform young boys, get them back on their feet, but very, very quickly Elwood discovers the horrors that the school actually holds and what they're doing to these children. And some of the beauty of this book is his friendship with a young man named Turner. Is that his name? Yeah. And they have almost like different ways of dealing with the situation and different outlooks on it, and their own rebellions kind of in the system. So I really, really loved this book. I don't have a single bad word to say about it, and I think the beauty of this book is that it's not super overwritten. It's pretty straightforward. It's telling you a very straightforward story. It doesn't need all that kind of other poetic language. It's very straightforward, and it just did a real service to the story, and it really felt so impactful. These young boys kind of at the whim of these really violent, racist men in power, and what they had to go through and how it affected them years to come. And some of the best bits of this book are when you're taken out of the reform school into these, when these men are much older and they're kind of reflecting, and who's able and willing to reflect, who can't even talk about it or fathom what happened to them, because boys don't stay boys forever. So I loved this. I have a few more Colson Whitehead books on my shelf. I have a short story collection that actually my brother had to read before going away to school. I think it's short stories, something City. I don't remember. I'll put it in the description if I can remember. But also The Underground Railroad, which is maybe even higher, has received higher praise than this. I'm not sure, but people love that book as well. So I was just blown away by this book. It's such a fast read also. It really kind of takes you right there. It doesn't have all this fluff to fill up pages, and it is so, so powerful. So I'm so glad I read it. And then we have a book that unfortunately worked for me not at all, so I don't even have that much to say about it, but I do know that people like it, so I think it wasn't for me, but that is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So people maybe know Ta-Nehisi Coates from Between the World and Me, which is a nonfiction book, which is on our shelves downstairs. I've never heard one bad thing about that book. It has received the highest praise, but this is a work of fiction. And unfortunately, the actual logistics of this book just didn't do it for me. So the idea sounds fantastic and sounds like something I would like. So the book, we're following a young boy named Hiram, and he's enslaved on a plantation in the South. And we realize very early on in the book that he's been separated from his mother, and that his father is actually the master of the plantation, and he has a half-brother who lives in the house with his father, who's a white man, or a white boy. This book also has elements of magical realism, and we learn that Hiram, from something that happens to him as a child, he has these abilities. And these abilities are always kind of mysterious to us. They're not pinned down super specifically until much later on in the book, but we do know that something is going to crop up eventually where there's a magical element to the book. And I think perhaps we follow Hiram from a young child into his young adulthood, and I think the best bits of this book are the actual Underground Railroad moments and how Ta-Nehisi Coates incorporated magic and these extraordinary powers into helping people escape slavery. So those moments were interesting, but I think what I didn't like about this book was the actual pacing and plotting of it all. It just felt like it didn't mesh well together. I think the whole first third of the book was painfully slow, and then the actual action of the book happened way too quickly, and I could have done with so much more of that. And I just felt like the plotting didn't really make sense, and the magical elements were brought in almost too abruptly, and then the moments where you're on the edge of your seat, they just are kind of thrown down, and then you move along. So I didn't love it, and I don't have too much else to say about it. It does have a very, very high rating on Goodreads, so I think it's just not for me. It had moments of beauty, but also the characters, I just needed way more from them. I wanted to know more about them, and their relationships, and when there were little moments of that, it was so beautiful, like specifically Hiram's relationship with an older woman who lives in the same plantation as him, and after his mother was separated from him, their beautiful relationship, and I just could have used way more of that and way less filler. So those are my opinions on it. It didn't work for me, unfortunately. Okay, and very last book. I'm going pretty quickly, I must say. That is All's Well by Mona Awad. A big, big book. So I talked about this in great detail in a vlog I did about it because I was so excited to read it. This is the same author that wrote Bunny, which has my whole heart. So I was very excited, and somebody did point out that I called the main character in this the wrong name. I believe I called her Amy because I was thinking of this, but this woman's name is Miranda. She works at a university running the theater department, and she suffers from chronic illness, chronic pain. And we realized that she had kind of her moment of glory when she was a young woman working in the theater industry, and an accident happened that left her unable to perform. And she definitely has this pent-up resentment and anger towards the children around her who she feels like don't care enough about it. They're not as talented as she was. And this is all impacted and made much more challenging for her from her chronic pain. She goes to a whole slew of doctors that either don't believe her, hurt her, make her feel worse, and she finds herself being silenced by the medical industry, by the people around her. She feels like she's a burden on them, or like, what's the point of explaining my pain and my illness if nobody understands or believes me or is able to help? So it's almost this like exhaustive cycle. And then we get the magical and the weirdness that Bunny had in store for us, and she is able to make the people around her feel the pain that she has so long suffered from and has been kind of pushed aside and made to be silent for. Like I said in my vlog, it is much too long. I think the character study of Miranda was done perfectly, and we just didn't need all the extra page count. It didn't do anything for me. And the ending was strange, and I didn't love it as much as Bunny. But I'm so glad I read this book. I had such an enjoyable time reading it. It's so smart, and I think it talks about a lot of really interesting, important topics in a way that is enjoyable and interesting and keeps you on your toes. And Miranda was such a fascinating character, and I loved the darkness of it all. Not a super huge stack for this month, but some good ones, some I didn't love. We'll keep it pushing. It is September, so I'm already in my cozy clothes. It's like 85 degrees outside, but that can't stop me. It is autumn. But thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about, or even just your favorite book of the month, something you think that I would love, favorite book you read in August, what you plan to read in September. We can chat about it all, anything and everything. And I'm going to be vlogging this weekend, so hopefully something interesting will come of that, but who really knows? I sometimes forget to film. But thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye, everyone.